Welcome everyone to the Campus Pride Spotlight Series. My name is Ayla Azim, my pronouns are she and her, and I'm an intern with Campus Pride. For those who don't know, Campus Pride is a leading national nonprofit that empowers student groups and student leaders working to create LGBTQ+ friendly colleges and university campuses. You can learn more at campuspride.org. Today I'll be interviewing the University of Wisconsin-Eau Clair for the Campus Pride Spotlight Series. This series is all about what today's universities and colleges provide today's LGBTQ+ students, our diverse gender and sexuality spectrum. We will highlight colleges and universities that are providing LGBTQ+ inclusivity on their campuses and learn more about their programs and services. I want to introduce to you the representative from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Clair now. Thank you so much for meeting with Campus Pride for the Spotlight Series. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Please provide your name, your pronouns, and your role on campus.
Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Dr. Christopher Jorgensen. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the director of UW-Eau Clair's Gender and Sexuality Resource Center.
Thank you so much for introduction. It's wonderful to have you here today. You have a 5 out of 5 star rating on the Campus Pride Index at campusprideindex.org, and you've been ranked among the best of the best in terms of LGBTQ+ friendly colleges and universities. So congratulations. So to start out, tell us what are some things that are on your campus for LGBTQ+ students, and specifically, what does your campus do for LGBTQ+ students that creates an inclusive space?
Well, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to talk about our institution and our students. I always leap at such opportunities. I think first and foremost, we strive to ensure that our queer students not only survive higher education, but thrive within it. And to ensure that they understand that they are visible, that they are respected, that their lived experiences are contextualized within the fabric of the institution. And so we do that with a variety of things, whether it's programmatically, whether it's policy-wise. I know we'll get to some specifics throughout the interview. One of the things that we're really excited about is students now, once they are admitted to UW-Eau Clair, can identify themselves in the student administrative system, specifically their gender identity, including trans, of course, and then sexual orientation, which includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, queer, and pansexual. And what's so exciting about this is that it allows, from the moment the student is admitted, even prior to them setting foot on campus, for the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center to reach out specifically to those students, but to do so in a way that protects their identities. We ensure that they understand it's protected by FERPA. That their parents will never know unless their parents have the login information of the student. And it's just one of the first and one of many steps that we take to ensure we know who our queer students are the moment they're admitted, so we can ascertain their progress throughout the institution, hopefully to persist to graduation.
That's really cool. That's a really cool concept. So thank you so much for that answer. What example can you share that signifies the importance of having a space on campus for LGBTQ+ students?
I think people have to understand that there are many queer students who don't have any space, right? Now, UW-Eau Clair is situated in a really interesting spot in Wisconsin. So many of our students either come from small farming communities or come from Minneapolis-St. Paul. Right? Now, we've got lots of students who are from neither of those two areas, but a good number of students do come from those particular areas. And we know from our students communicating it to us that many of them have never experienced any sense of community or any sense of safety, either physically or otherwise, until they come to campus. So we have a physical resource center space on campus called The Bridge. We're actually just about to start a construction project to expand the space. And it serves as a hub so that our students can go to it and not only find other folks like themselves, but also access resources. And they can have direct contact with the Gender and Sexuality Resource Center, because my my student services coordinator actually offices out of that space. And we know we've had certain students for whom the idea of walking into a queer space is really intimidating. And so we have specific programs built in that invite them into the space without so much pressure of walking into it. We've heard several times of students over the years who will tell us that for the first semester or sometimes the first year, they will kind of loiter and have lunch outside of that area just to be near queer students. And then once they finally walk into the space, I mean, you give it a very small amount of time and suddenly they know everybody, they're talking to everybody, they're involved, and it's such a wonderful thing to see. So I don't think you can ever underestimate the transformational aspect of having inclusive spaces on college campuses for people who, in many cases, have never had one.
That's really cool. That's really cool. That's really important.
It is, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just, and everyone comes to the institution and the bridge, the physical resource center space with completely different lived experiences, right? So, I mean, some have never had any, some have only had negative, are looking to continue positive experience. So we just try to meet everybody where they're at and kind of remove that sense that they have to, be someone they're not in order to come into the institution, their space. So, we tell folks, if you don't want to talk to anybody, but just want to come into the space and sit and study so you're around queer people, that's perfectly legit, right? There's no expectation those spaces.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for that answer. May you please tell us more about your campus's LGBTQ+ inclusive policies, and how do students on campus feel about such policies?
Yeah, our students have been very excited about them because I think the more they have the opportunities to talk to students at other institutions, they understand more fully the rarity of some of the stuff that we have at UW-Eau Clair. So some of the ones that we have, I mentioned that students are able to self-select and identify themselves in the administrative system. That's incredibly rare in the United States. And so that's one aspect right when they're admitted. Our students also can take advantage of our preferred name policy. So they can, just with a very easy e-form, they can change their preferred name as many times as they wish. And it goes to the university directory, Canvas, which is our academic platform, the advisor center, the student center, class roster, grade roster, and their degree audit as well. And so most people on campus will only know them by the name they wish to be referred to. Students can also add their preferred name to their student ID at no cost. The GSRC covers the cost of that because we understand that cost can be a prohibitive factor as far as access, and so we want to eliminate those as much as possible. So we've got the student IDs, but we also understand sometimes, for instance, financial aid, where they have to use a student's legal name. Our student IDs are voter compliant, so they have in bigger print on the front their student ID or their preferred name, and then in tiny print on the back they'll have their legal name, just so that their ID can still be voter compliant. So we've got that. We have all of our discrimination policies on campus are protective of queer students. We address any bias incidents on campus swiftly. I happen to be the chair of our bias incident reporting team on campus as well. And we take all of those instances very, very seriously. And so what I often tell students is, well, we cannot promise you that you'll never experience bias. Any institution that tells you that they can may not be being honest with you. What we can promise you is that the institutional response will be swift, and that the community that you can fall back on will be robust and understanding. And so we try to be really blunt, and we try to be very just honest with our incoming students, so there are no surprises. And that has worked really well. Also, as far as policies, all new construction at UW-Eau Clair is required to have all gender restrooms in them. And a rarity in higher education, UW-Eau Clair has currently 105 all gender restrooms spread across our entire institutional footprint, which is really exciting. We call it our P in Peace campaign, because if somebody needs to go to the restroom, we don't like the idea that the entirety of the queer community has to then funnel themselves to the only 4 options throughout campus. So virtually all buildings have all gender restrooms in them, with more to come, right? So we are already strategizing a few buildings that are old, that don't have single stall restrooms, that are multi-stall, that are going to take several thousand additional dollars to actually really renovate. But we really want students to be able to focus on academics while they're here, right? And community building, and access, and institutional recognition, insofar as preferred name, etc., are core, I think, to that particular endeavor.
Really good answer. I really liked the all gender restrooms and how there's so many of them are on your campus, because at my college, there's hardly any. So
Yeah.
really good.
Isn't that frustrating? I mean, it's one of those things where, we'll talk to students. I mean, whether I talk to colleagues around the United States, or often when we have queer faculty or staff who are interviewing on campus, they usually ask to speak to me, just to meet with me. And they usually ask, what's it really like here? Because no one wants to feel sold. You know what I mean? Like, whether you're a student, you're a faculty, or staff, nobody wants to be sold this false impression of what the reality really is. And so I find it to be counterproductive to do that. But a huge need across higher education in the United States. And the things that people take for granted when they know they're going to have a restroom for them in any particular building. So the more we can alleviate that from our students' minds, they don't have to worry about that, then the more they can focus on, developing themselves and their academic programs and co-curriculars, etc.
Really good. Really cool. So in your opinion, you spoke about this a little bit, but just further elaborating, why do you feel, in your personal opinion, the importance of your campus providing spaces for LGBTQ+ students?
There are a lot of reasons. It boggles the mind that in 2021, the vast majority of colleges in the United States still don't have a full-time, dedicated staff member to advocate for queer people. And more than that many campuses only have a single person advocating for what is really a very large and far-reaching set of communities, right? I think we're used to saying the queer community, or we're used to saying LGBTQIA+, but each one of those letters represents a community that easily would deserve a full-time person, right? Because the needs and the lived experiences are so varied across communities. And so higher education in general, and institutions more specifically, do a disservice to queer students when on the surface they say they support diversity, which is one of those words that has become entirely nebulous, and then don't actually put their money where their mission is, right? Or where their mission purportedly is. So I think the push has to be to continue to fund support systems, staffing, programmatic opportunities, scholarships for queer students, because it is a large and increasingly more visible community of students. So when I think of all of the panicked conversations that happen in higher education about the cliff that's coming in 2025 because of the impending dearth of graduating high school students, I don't see how higher education then can continue to ignore what is a substantial student population. And what I have found is when you create an inclusive environment, when you tell queer students, look, we may not be perfect, but we are trying. We are going to listen to you. We understand that needs and expectations change, and we are going to change with them. They come to you. We have seen our student enrollment increase very steadily as we've become more visibly queer inclusive. So I don't think you can ever underestimate not just the power of it, but the need to create these sorts of experiences for a community that is so overly politicized and denigrated in so many different ways and in so many different mediums, whether it's, social media or, news media or in print, it doesn't matter. Queer people, like many marginalized communities, get it from all sides. So I think it's about time we recognize that queer people have always been in higher ed, and we are deserving not just of institutional scraps, whatever's left over, if anything, but we deserve to be central to the institutional mission and strategic planning.
That was a really good answer, seriously. Because I agree. I mean, most colleges and universities don't hardly even have an LGBTQ plus center for students.
They don't, right? And then they'll have like this poor staff person who has like, well, 3/4 of my job is this, and then 1/4 of my job is this. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, we're a high need community for a variety of reasons. The amount of time that we spend ensuring that students get mental health support and services, or understanding the legal processes that some students have to go through, whether it's establishing independence from their parents who have rejected them, or the process of changing one's legal name or one's legal gender. There's just it's an intricate set of needs that our students require. And so beyond UW-Eau Clair is to, shout at the rooftops, our students need the support. And more than that, they deserve it, So, and that's not even, talking about intersectionally where some of our queer students need even more support, right? So, I'm a big cheerleader for my queer family. And I think we need to hold institutions' feet to the fire.
Yeah, really exceptional answer. So you invested some time talking about LGBTQ plus students and their different intersections of identity. So how does your campus support students across their different intersections?
It's one of in particular now, it's one of my biggest focuses. So I just finished my doctorate this past May, and my dissertation was perceptions of persistence among queer students of color in higher education at a predominantly white institution. And UW-Eau Clair is a predominantly white institution, as is most, if not all, the institutions in the UW system. And so with that in mind, we have to be intentional and we have to be strategic insofar as not just our recruitment of our students, but in the ways we ensure that once on campus, those students feel safe, those students feel respected, those students feel that they can concentrate on their academics, right? We know at a predominantly white institution, in particular, whiteness is going to be a huge issue. So with our queer community on campus, we ensure that we're having a conversation about whiteness and white supremacy with our white queer students so that they don't end up oppressing members of their community, right? So I think educating and providing space to have those conversations is of course, one of the main things you do in higher education, right? Providing educational opportunities. But I also think institutionally, it's important for people to see themselves in the institution. So, when we have light pole banners on campus that have, pictures of Marsha P. Johnson or Sylvia Rivera with links that folks who see them, anyone on campus, can access it and learn about who these people are, which is just as important to queer people as it is a visitor, then you start to change the culture of the institution by degrees, right? And I think that's really important. So in our queer living community on campus, which is called the Rainbow Floor in Housing, we wanted to make sure that the communal space for our queer students featured not just a moment in queer history, but queer icons without whom a living community like a Rainbow Floor most likely would not be possible. And so, we have an entire wall that is a digital graphic of an image that we received permission from the National LGBT Resource Center in New York to use. That is Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera marching for queer rights. And so not only can they see themselves, if you are a queer person of color or a queer trans person of color, but those who aren't have a little plaque that they can read to understand who these folks are and what we owe other queer people, without whom we wouldn't have a platform to be ourselves, right? So intersectionality is, I don't know. Intersectionality, higher education has a love affair with intersectionality, but they have a love affair with the idea of intersectionality. I think we love to catalog different identities, but then the work kind of stops there. And intersectionality requires that we examine the power. That's really the crux of it, right? The power that is attendant to those identities. And I'm not excluded from that, right? I'm a white cisgender gay male. So I have to make sure that when I'm developing programming, when I'm curating a space, that it's reflective of the students whose voices may not have the platform that other voices have, right? And letting our students and our faculty and staff, for that matter, know that our job is not to speak for or over intersectional queer communities, but it's to pass the mic, right? And so for me, as a practitioner in student affairs, it's kind of like, well, how do I make that happen? So one of the ways that we do that, one of our flagship programs at UW-Eau Clair is called Freak Week. So it's FREAQWEEK, title of a program that centers around language reclamation and the idea of otherness, right, and othering. And it's a very extensive program whereby we take a cohort of our students, the vast majority of whom are queer, and a revolving position of a queer faculty or staff. We go to San Francisco for 2 weeks in the summer, and we attend the Frameline Film Festival, right, which is the world's oldest and largest queer film festival. And then while there, everyone has to see a minimum of 25 films. So it's a lot of work. They have to do blogs while they're there. They have to do vlogs while they're there. The students are split up, so they curate these student presentations. And then when we get back to Eau Claire, we then have to curate our own queer film festival here. And so those queer film festivals highlight often our most marginalized queer folks. So it provides us an opportunity to talk about, queer folks and immigration, queer folks and ability or disability, queer folks and sexuality, a global queer perspective, religion and queer folks, and film is such a powerful way to have those conversations. And then we invite, filmmakers from around in 2019, of course, because 2020 was canceled because of COVID. But 2019, we featured 17 feature films and 24 short films for our Freak Week calendar. We had filmmakers from Argentina, from Brazil, from Texas, and we had youth activists come who were in the films. And then we screen these films, and then we have really robust discussions afterwards. And we make sure that the most marginalized, in particular, of queer people are the focus of it, right? And then lastly, it's a long answer to your question. And then lastly, the Fireball, which is our largest event on campus throughout the academic year. It's a very large, extravagant drag ball, right? And when I first started the Fireball, I knew that it would be a wasted opportunity to not dig in to the politicization of queer people, even though the event itself on the surface is just fun, right? So the Fireball, which we have about 1,500 people over 2 nights attend, is very political. So we highlight and celebrate Black Lives Matter. We highlight and celebrate trans lives. Even all of the t-shirts that all the volunteers have say things like, no one is illegal on stolen land. We are acutely aware that in Wisconsin, in UW-Eau Clair, that we occupy indigenous lands, right? So we don't want to forget that, even in celebratory events. So we've celebrated the Me Too movement. We've done all these sorts of things. So folks go there often expecting entertainment, and they get it, but they also have the opportunity throughout the entirety of the show to learn about the importance of advocating for the lives of queer people, not just to be entertained by us, right? But to truly advocate for us, right? Which includes voting in particular ways, right? Having conversations with people who are problematic in various ways, challenging institutional discrimination in various ways. So at every step of the way, we try to ensure that we're intersectional and that we are individually and collectively held accountable, for each of the steps that we take on campus.
That's really cool. The Fireball event and the Freak Week both sound really cool.
Oh, they're fun. I mean, it's nice because we get so close to, it's so wonderful for us to see a group of students who, when they first meet, some of them don't know each other and some maybe, shy or whatever. And by the end of it, it's just like this really tight knit, group of people, because while they're in San Francisco and seeing all these films, it coincides with Pride in San Francisco. So we all go to the Pride parade. We talk about, we have hard conversations, right? We have hard conversations about the police presence at Pride. We have conversations about the corporatization of Pride, of pinkwashing it. We have conversations about homelessness and gentrification of queer spaces. We go to the Trans March. We go to the Dyke March. We go to all these, which is political activism, right? And so the more we can provide opportunities for our students to not just better understand queer history and in turn queer present, but to better understand themselves and their place within it, it's a wonderful experience. Just as a bystander, it's a wonderful experience to have.
Yeah, beautiful answer. So how do LGBTQ plus students specifically get involved on your campus? And do you have active out LGBTQ plus student leaders?
Yes, as a matter of fact. One of our recent past student body presidents was an out queer woman of color. We have lots of opportunities for students to get involved. We know that not everyone is looking to be an activist, right? Some students are not there yet. They're just looking to be themselves, right? Without immediate reprisal from family or friends, etc. So it kind of depends on what the student is looking for. We try to meet them where they're at. So if students are just looking for volunteer opportunities and community, we'll offer, hey, you can maybe be a volunteer at this particular event. And in so doing, you get to meet other queer people. You can get involved with Pride, which is our student organization on campus, which is a wonderful group of students. You can have an internship in the Gender Sexuality Resource Center. We have an intern program. We have 12 internship positions that are very competitive. And there's any number of things you can do as a student intern. We have a zine on campus that's called Out, which is really a queer collective space where students can highlight their artwork or their writing or their music, because we use a platform on there where you can include that. Students can do service learning. We have a service learning requirement at UW-Eau Clair before graduation, and so they can fulfill that service learning requirement by getting involved. Students often fulfill academic requirements via the GSRC. We also offer practicum experiences for graduate students in the GSRC on campus. There's so many ways for students to get involved, right? And I think if we spend all of our time always just thinking about ourselves and our experiences, it's not as rich. If you can, with other queer folks, engage in various opportunities that won't necessarily be about you. Do you know what I mean? Like if we take students and we go to one of the area food shelters, right? If you have a group doing that work together, then I think it can be powerful community building, but also provide you different frames of reference for various experiences that you may or may not have any experience with. So there's no shortage of experiences that we offer on campus for our students, regardless of where they are in their identity.
Really cool. That really sounds like those students can really get involved in a lot of different ways, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always tell students, because money is always one of the big things, right? That students. So, for instance, the Freak Week program where we take them to San Francisco and all this kind of stuff, students don't pay for any of it. So through grants and through the Fireball, which is our big fundraising arm, it's all taken care of. Because I never want a queer student, or any student for that matter, but a queer student in this case, to not do something on campus because they can't afford it. I think that is a failure at the institutional level if that becomes a barrier for students. So we do whatever we can to ensure that if a student doesn't want to be involved, it's because they don't want to be involved, not because they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Social justice, equality, and equity, they're constant journeys of progress. Yeah. So what's on the agenda for your campus in the next 2 to 3 years?
The next 2 to 3 years, I think first and foremost, and I've done some presenting on this topic with the virtual NASPA conference. The Higher Learning Commission asked me to come speak about it before COVID kind of put a kibosh on that. But strategic enrollment management is the mechanism by which higher education recruits, retains, and provides opportunities to persist for students on campus, right? So strategic enrollment management is understanding more holistically who you are recruiting to campus, who you are recruiting to campus and what their experiences are and whether or not they're staying, and if they're not staying, why not? Queer people have almost exclusively been left out of strategic enrollment management. So one of my big goals, and right now we're at UW-Eau Clair, we have a search underway for a new vice chancellor of strategic enrollment, is to ensure that queer people, queer students, are included in each and every aspect of strategic enrollment so that we deliberately recruit our queer students. We know who they are as much as is able, understanding that some students will not be out for a variety of reasons during the admissions process, that we can better understand retention amongst the queer population and persistence. So that when a student goes to an institution and they look at a fact book, right, which presents all this information about the institution, if you're looking at the gender makeup of an institution, it's not binary, right? If you're looking for the different characteristics of any particular incoming class, it's not just cisgender. It's not just heterosexual, right? That all of the front-facing elements and data sets institutionally reflect the queer community, right? So that's one of the big things that I'm in a particular push for right now. Also, at UW-Eau Clair, because the rainbow floor has been so incredibly popular, what we ended up doing, even our first year it was open, we ended up using the floor above as like an overflow, so that the queer students who didn't get on the floor at least were near the floor. So our Housing and Res Life, they're wonderful, wonderful partners. And our director of Housing and Res Life is just wonderful. And so pro-queer. and whose birthday happens to be on National Coming Out Day, which we celebrate every year. So we already knew right when we opened the rainbow floor that we most likely would have to augment it. So now we're thinking, okay, so what will it look like, right? If we augment it to 2 floors, what will that look like? And we've had some interesting conversations with other institutions who are thinking about this, who are in various stages of creating these sorts of living environments. Do we create a floor that is trans and non-binary specific? I do find that our trans and non-binary students specifically request to live with trans and non-binary students. So we may do that. Haven't decided yet, but we'll have 2 floors. We're going to augment that, which I think is going to be a really, really, it's going to meet the need, you know? And then, of course, in the fall, it'll open, well, officially it'll open in the fall, the expansion of our individual resource center space, which is going to be so wonderful. And also, my next focus really in the next 2 to 3 years is to curate a robust and substantial menu of scholarships for our queer students, right? In particular, the populations that are the most financially insecure, right? And so the Fireball this year as an example, because of course, you know, no events are allowed on campus. So we're using the Fireball. We're basically gonna do like a retrospective virtual event showing clips from various shows throughout the last 10 years that we've had it. And the entire purpose of the virtual show is to crowdfund for scholarships for queer students of color and queer trans students of color specifically, right? And so I want to be strategic in our scholarship generation. And I know there are people out there. That's the thing too, right? We get a lot of emails from folks who went to UWEau Clair like 30 years ago, or, you know, and they're like, boy, I wish I would have had that when I was there, but I'm so happy you're doing that. Can I help out? Right? So it's to reach out to, you know, folks who attended the institution when it was not what it is now, and say, what can you do to ensure that students now are able to succeed without worrying about money, you know, as much as they're able. And so those are just some of the things that I think I've got a really strong focus on at the moment. And my student services coordinator, Callie, is phenomenal. Internship program and you know, is programmatically amazing. So you know, between she and I and our family of student interns, there really is no limit, you know. And then I have to say, as far as what the next 2 to 3 years look like, we always have to be asking the students, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what do you want? And what will it look like? And continuing to engage, in particular, our queer students of color and queer trans students of color, understanding the difficulties that exist being a person of color on a predominantly white campus, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a jam-packed 2 to 3 years that will go by in the blink of an eye, I'm sure.
Yeah. What you said about the scholarship seemed really interesting.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me the connections that people have with the queer community, and it's often people you wouldn't expect, really. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you get someone who reaches out and they're like, "Oh, you know, my daughter, you know, I have a trans daughter," and you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that at all," and you know, I would love to start a scholarship. Oh, that's wonderful. Let's do that. We have an alumna who was never here. Graduated before I got here in my current position, but who I knew about, and who had came to campus a couple times to do these wonderful presentations, who now works for Google. And so I just, you know, talked, she's wonderful, and just talked to her, would you be interested in starting, you know, a scholarship for trans folks? She's like, oh my God, I would love that, you know. And it's a specific scholarship that helps trans students pay for things that are barriers to self-realization. So we've got a lot of students who want to get a legal name change, but who can't afford you know, the process of doing it. And so this scholarship will pay for that and pay for those things that would otherwise be a barrier. So it's just finding those pockets of support, and creating the sort of environment on campus that will make queer students who graduate excited to then contribute once they're able to.
Yeah. I mean, definitely diminishing financial barriers as much as possible is really important.
Because it certainly isn't getting any better anytime soon.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it just bothers me when our students are so concerned about money. I was there as a college student. I know what that's like. And how can you concentrate on your academics when you just want to survive? You're just worrying about, rent, and you're worrying about food, and you're worrying about, books. And so the GSRC steps in as much as we can. And then where the GSRC may be limited by state policy and how we can, spend money, then we rely on the network of support that we've curated over the years to pick up the slack. So we've got any number of queer folks we can call who are current faculty or staff or community members who are so quick to say, hey, look, if you ever have a student who, needs some help, don't hesitate, come to me and I'll help them. And so the generosity is pretty remarkable. But when you think about it, that's what we have done historically, queer people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we have to continue to do. I tell my students, community isn't something that happens by mere proximity. Just because we're close in proximity doesn't mean there's any sense of community. That community really requires effort, right? It requires you to understand the lived experiences of your queer family, right? Yeah. And so that requires humility, right? that requires embracing discomfort. That requires listening, and then moving forward in ways that acknowledge our diverse lived experiences.
Beautiful. How in 3 words would you describe your campus for a prospective LGBTQ+ student?
3 words. As you can tell by the entirety of this interview, being succinct is not my strong suit. 3 words. I would say intentional is one. Community, I think, is another one. And fabulous.
Love it.
Offer a caveat and add more words in there. So many people feel like you have to flee the Midwest if you're a queer person in order to be happy. And I reject that idea. I really think we have the know-how, we have the desire, and we have the ability to create communities from which people don't have to flee, that they can be really happy and successful in.
Yeah, amazing answer. Thank you so much. Please share for those watching on your website to learn more about LGBTQ+ life on your campus. Thank you so much again for being here. Campus Pride appreciates your hard work and continued efforts to create an inclusive space for LGBTQ+ students to live, learn, grow, and especially thrive at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Clair. Your work makes a positive difference in so many lives, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Again, thank you so much for watching the Campus Pride Spotlight series. If you wish to learn more about this campus or any other college or university, you can search for free at the Campus Pride Index at campusprideindex.org. That's campusprideindex.org for over 400+ colleges and universities who have come out as LGBTQ+ friendly. My name is Ayla, and again, thank you so much for watching.